The arrest. The deep void of space was silent, except for the faint hum of a patrol ship drifting through the darkness. Orvac 7, a Krillic Empire vessel, was scanning the sector for any illegal activity. Captain Vrosh, a tall, reptilian alien with dark blue scales, stood on the command deck, his yellow eyes fixed on the holographic display. "Commander," a bridge officer said, "we've detected a small human cargo ship near the border." Vrosh narrowed his eyes. The Krillic Empire was at an uneasy peace with the humans, but trust was thin. The lone human ship in restricted space, that was suspicious. "Send a boarding team," Vrosh ordered. "If there's anything unusual, arrest the pilot." Inside the small cargo ship, the old human sat alone. His hands rested lazily on the control panel, his gray beard slightly unkempt. His clothes were simple. Nothing about him seemed dangerous. He looked like just another wandering drifter. A sudden beep from his console caught his attention. Incoming transmission. A harsh alien voice came through. "Unidentified human vessel. You are trespassing in Krillic territory. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded." The old man sighed, scratching his chin. "Well, this should be interesting." He reached forward and casually pressed a button, shutting down the ship's power. Outside, the Krillic patrol ship extended its docking arm, and within moments, a team of heavily armed soldiers stormed inside. The old man didn't move. He simply sat there, watching them. "Stand up," barked the lead soldier, aiming his plasma rifle. Slowly, the old human rose to his feet, stretching his arms like he had all the time in the world. He didn't look worried. He didn't even seem surprised. "You're under arrest for violating restricted space," the soldier growled. "State your name and purpose." The old man smiled. "Just passing through." "Don't play games," the soldier snapped. "What's your name?" The human shrugged. "I've had a few." The soldiers exchanged glances. This man was too calm. No fear, no panic, just amusement. "Restrain him," the lead soldier ordered. Two Krillic soldiers stepped forward and clamped energy cuffs onto his wrists. The moment the cuffs activated, the ship's lights flickered. The soldiers hesitated. One of them looked at his wrist console. "Sir, something just interfered with the system." "Ignore it," the lead soldier said. "Take him to the ship." As they escorted the old man through the docking tunnel, he took one last look at his small cargo ship. His smirk widened. They had no idea what they had just done. Back on Orvac 7, Captain Vrosh stood on the bridge, waiting. The security team entered, dragging the old human along. Vrosh studied him carefully. Just an old man. Nothing special. But something felt wrong. "Scan him," Vrosh ordered. A nearby officer activated a biometric scanner. A holographic screen flickered to life, displaying the human's details. Or at least, it should have. Instead, the screen glitched, filling with unreadable data. The officer frowned. "Sir, the scanner isn't recognizing his identity. It's like he doesn't exist." Vrosh's eyes narrowed. "That's impossible. Run it again." The officer tried. The same error. The human chuckled. "Technology these days, huh?" Vrosh stepped closer, his sharp gaze fixed on the prisoner. "Who are you?" The old man tilted his head. "You arrested me, Captain. Shouldn't you already know?" Vrosh gritted his teeth. He didn't like this. "Put him in the brig. I'll deal with him later." Two guards grabbed the old man and pulled him toward the prison cells. As they walked away, Vrosh watched them, a bad feeling creeping into his gut. Something about this human was very, very wrong. And soon, the entire ship was going to find out why. The brig of Orvac 7 was a cold, metallic chamber deep within the ship, designed to hold dangerous criminals. But right now, it held only one prisoner. An old human who sat calmly on the hard bench, his wrists still bound by the energy cuffs. He didn't look worried. In fact, he almost looked amused. Outside the cell, two Krillic guards stood watch, their plasma rifles held tight. One of them, A younger soldier named Crass sneered at the prisoner. "What's so funny, old man?" The human simply stretched his arms and leaned back, just thinking about how this is all going to play out. Crass scoffed. "Yeah, and how's that?" The human smirked. "Not how you expect." Before Crass could respond, the lights flickered, just for a second. A small glitch. The other guard frowned, glancing at his wrist console. "That's strange. The security grid just reset." Crass waved it off. "It's a malfunction. This ship is old." But then the lights flickered again, this time longer. A low hum filled the brig, and suddenly, the energy barrier of the cell deactivated for half a second before flickering back on. The guard stiffened. That wasn't normal. Crass quickly contacted the bridge. "Captain, we have a..." His voice was cut off as the ship suddenly shuddered. Every screen on Orvac 7 went dark. The hum of the engine staggered, then returned at a lower frequency. Red emergency lights bathed the hallways in a dim glow. On the bridge, Captain Vrosh leaped to his feet. "Report. What just happened?" An officer scrambled over the controls. "Sir, we've lost access to several systems. Our security grid is fluctuating. And..." He froze as the main ship doors unlocked. Every single one. All at once. Vrosh's eyes widened. "That's impossible." In the brig, the two guards looked at each other, their grip tightening on their rifles. Crass turned toward the human prisoner, his scales paling. The old man smiled. "Looks like it's starting." Crass stepped back. "What did you do?" The human shrugged. "Just a little insurance. You arrested me, after all. I had to be prepared." Crass aimed his rifle. "Shut up. You're not going anywhere." The lights went out completely. A second later, the emergency red glow returned. But this time, Crass and the other guard were alone. The old man was gone. Panic set in. Crass spun in circles, checking every corner of the cell. No one was there. No sound. No movement. And then, the overhead speaker crackled. A slow, amused voice echoed through the brig. "Told you it wouldn't go how you expected." Crass's blood ran cold. The prisoner had escaped. And he was loose on the ship. Crass stood frozen, gripping his plasma rifle so tightly his claws dug into the metal. His breathing was shallow, his mind racing. The old human had been there just seconds ago, right in front of him. The cell had been locked, the energy barrier intact. But now he was gone, as if he had never been there. The overhead lights flickered again, and the emergency red glow cast eerie shadows on the cold, metallic walls. The other guard, a veteran named Jorak, hissed in frustration and tapped his wrist communicator. "Bridge, this is brig security. The prisoner has escaped." Static. Jorak frowned, shaking his wrist device. "Bridge, do you copy?" Nothing. Just a low, crackling hum. Crass swallowed hard. The ship's internal comms were down. This doesn't make sense," Crass stammered, looking at the empty cell. "How did he..." Jorak cursed under his breath. "No time to think. We need to secure the exits. He couldn't have gone far." But Crass wasn't sure. He felt something wrong deep in his gut. The old man hadn't just escaped. He had disappeared like a ghost. Jorak motioned toward the hallway. "Come on. We'll head to the security station and..." The lights flickered again. This time, the walls hummed, and a strange whispering sound filled the air. Crass's blood ran cold. It wasn't static. It wasn't the ship malfunctioning. It was a voice. Faint, distorted, like it was coming from all around them. "Are you afraid?" Crass turned sharply. What the hell was that? Jorak gritted his teeth. "Ignore it. Keep moving." They stepped out of the brig, weapons raised, moving cautiously through the dimly lit corridors. The ship's systems continued to flicker, as if something, or someone, was inside them. Crass's mind raced. This wasn't normal. He had arrested dozens of humans before. They all acted the same, angry, scared, weak. But this one was different. Who was he? The hallway stretched out before them, eerily quiet. Too quiet. Normally, engineers, officers, and crew would be patrolling these corridors. But now, it felt empty. Crass checked his motion scanner. Nothing. No life signs. No movement. His scales crawled with unease. Where is everyone? Jorik kept walking. We'll find out soon enough. Then the ship shuddered. A deep metallic groan echoed through the structure, as if something massive was shifting inside the walls. Crass and Jorik stopped cold. The whispering returned, but this time it was clearer. You should have left me alone. A sound came from behind them. A soft tap. They turned. The old human stood at the end of the hallway. No restraints, no fear, just watching them. Crass raised his rifle. Don't move. The human didn't flinch. He just tilted his head, studying them. Jorik aimed his weapon too. Hands up now. The old man sighed, shaking his head. You still don't understand, do you? Crass hesitated. Understand what? Then, the lights exploded. Darkness swallowed the hallway. Crass's heart pounded as he felt something rush past him. A cold gust of air, a whisper right by his ear. Run. Panic took over. He spun wildly, firing his rifle, but his shots hit nothing. The emergency lights flickered back on, casting an eerie red glow. Jorik stood beside him, breathing hard. But the human was gone again. Crass's hands shook. What? What is he? Jorik's voice was grim. Not just a human. They had arrested a monster, and it was loose on their ship. Crass's hands trembled as he reloaded his plasma rifle. His heart pounded so hard, he could hear it over the low hum of the failing ship systems. The old human was playing with them. 1 second, he was standing there, staring at them with those knowing eyes. And the next, gone. Jorik growled, We need to regroup. We're sitting in the open like idiots. Crass nodded quickly. He didn't argue. His claws were slick with sweat as he followed Jorik down the dim corridor. The ship was eerily silent, save for the occasional flicker of failing lights and the distant groaning of metal. It felt like the entire vessel was breathing. Jorik tapped his wrist communicator again. Bridge, respond. We need immediate lockdown on all decks. A sharp static screech blasted from the device, followed by a voice. Not from the bridge. From him. You're running out of time. Crass flinched and ripped the communicator off his wrist, throwing it to the floor. He's inside the damned systems. How? How is this possible? Jorik didn't answer. His claws tightened around his weapon as they moved faster toward the security station. They needed backup. Now. The hallway stretched long and empty ahead of them. Every few seconds, the ship flickered between light and darkness, and each time the darkness came, Crass swore he could hear footsteps. Getting closer. Then, movement. A shadow. A flicker of something not quite there. Crass whirled, aiming his rifle, his breathing sharp and ragged. I swear, if you don't show yourself. A whisper right behind him. I'm right here. Crass spun and fired blindly. The plasma shots tore through empty space, hitting nothing but the walls. And then, pain. A cold hand gripped the back of his neck, not squeezing, not hurting, just holding. Crass went rigid, his breath catching in his throat. His entire body locked up as if paralyzed. Jorik's voice came distant and panicked. Crass. What's wrong? The hand let go. Crass collapsed to his knees, gasping. He turned slowly. The old man stood inches away. His eyes were calm. Too calm. As if he wasn't even trying. Jorik fired. Plasma bolts blazed through the air, but they passed right through the human, hitting the walls behind him. A trick. A hologram. The human only smiled. You still don't understand, do you? Krass's voice came out as a whisper. What? What are you? The old man tilted his head, as if considering the question. Then he leaned in slightly, his next words sending a chill down Krass's spine. You arrested the wrong man. Then, darkness. Not just flickering lights. Total, crushing blackness. Krass felt something shift. A weight in the air. A presence. A sound. A heartbeat. No, not his. Not Jorek's. Something else. Then, the emergency lights returned. Krass and Jorek were alone. No sign of the human. No sound. Nothing. But when Krass looked down, his own rifle was gone, and in its place, a single message was carved into the metal floor. Bridge. Jorek read it, his tail lashing in fear. He's heading for the command deck. Krass felt cold. He's not just heading there. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. He's already there. The bridge was in chaos. Captain Vecner's mandibles clicked in frustration as he pounded the emergency override panel. The ship's systems were unresponsive. Security footage was corrupted. The ship's internal sensors were blind. And worst of all, the command doors were locked from the outside. The bridge crew moved in frantic panic, their reptilian eyes darting between flickering control panels. The old human was loose, and somehow he was in control of the ship. Vecner turned to his communications officer. Can you reach the security team? The officer's scales were pale with fear. Sir, all channels are blocked. The only thing coming through is... He hesitated. Vecner's eyes narrowed. What? The officer's trembling claws pressed a button. A deep static hum filled the bridge, followed by a voice. His voice. Captain, I hope you're comfortable, because this ship is mine now. Vecner's tail lashed. Who are you? He growled. The speakers crackled. A low chuckle came through. I was going to ask you the same thing. Vecner clenched his fists. Listen to me, human. You are outnumbered and outmatched. Surrender now, and I may. The lights shut off. Every single console, every control panel, even the emergency backup systems, dead. Only the dim red emergency lights remained, casting eerie shadows across the bridge. Then, the main view screen flickered to life. And there he was. The old human stood in the middle of the brig, facing the camera. Except, it wasn't live footage. The timestamp showed it had been recorded hours ago. The human looked straight into the lens, as if he were staring directly at them. Then he spoke. You thought I was your prisoner. The bridge crew stood frozen. The human smiled. A calm, knowing smile. But I was just waiting. Vecner's blood ran cold. Waiting for what? The human on the screen tilted his head slightly. For you to bring me exactly where I wanted to be. The screen cut to black. A long, sharp silence followed. No one moved. No one breathed. Then, the main doors to the bridge hissed open. Vecner spun, weapon drawn, and the old human stepped inside. No guards, no restraints, just him, calm, unbothered, like he had already won. The crew scrambled for their weapons, but before anyone could fire, every single console exploded in a shower of sparks. The ship trembled violently, sending officers crashing to the floor. The human never flinched. Vecner struggled to his feet, his eyes burning with rage. Who are you? He snarled. The old man simply smiled. Then he spoke the words that made every officer on the bridge go still. I am the last of my kind, and you just gave me a warship. Silence. The words hung in the air like a curse. I am the last of my kind, and you just gave me a warship. Vecner's grip tightened on his weapon, but his claws felt weak. His crew, his officers, none of them moved. They all felt it. A shift in power. This wasn't an escape. It was a takeover. The old human took another step forward, his boots echoing in the quiet bridge. You don't even know what you've done, do you? His voice was calm, almost amused. You arrested an old man, weak, frail, a harmless human. Vecna bared his fangs. You are human. That makes you weak. The human smiled, not in anger, in pity. Then why are you afraid? Vecna hissed. His tail lashed in frustration. I am not afraid. The human tilted his head. No. Then, the ship rumbled. Lights flickered. The engines roared to life. Vecna's heart pounded. His officers looked at their dead consoles, their broken controls. They hadn't done anything. The ship was moving on its own. A deep, ominous hum filled the air, the sound of systems waking up. Vecna turned back to the human, his breath sharp. What did you do? The human sighed. I took back what was mine. Vecna's blood ran cold. What do you mean? The old man's eyes darkened. This ship, he said softly, isn't yours. Vecna took a step back. Liar. The human chuckled. Am I? A warning alarm blared through the bridge. One of the officers screamed, Captain, the ship, it's leaving orbit. I can't stop it. Another officer cried out, weapons systems are coming online. Vecna's breath hitched. Impossible. He spun toward the human. How? The old man took another step forward. The dim red emergency lights cast his shadow across the bridge. And for the first time, Vecna noticed something. The human wasn't afraid of them. He had never been afraid, because he had never been their prisoner. He had been waiting for this exact moment. Vecna's mind raced. Who was this human? How could he control the ship? No human had this kind of power, this kind of command over an enemy warship. Unless Vecna's breath caught. A terrible realization struck him like a blade to the chest. The ship didn't belong to them. It belonged to him. His officers stared in horror as the ship's systems fully rebooted. A new command appeared on the main view screen. Nivuvu Commandier Rixi Ogenizist, authorizing control. The human's voice was quiet, deadly. I was the captain of this ship long before you ever set foot on it. Vecna felt the blood drain from his face. This wasn't an enemy warship. It was stolen. A lost human warship, taken from the battlefield years ago. And now, its true commander had returned. Vecna barely had time to react before the human spoke again. His voice carried the weight of an executioner. I'm taking back my crew. The ship lurched. The bridge exploded into movement. Officers screamed as invisible hands ripped them from their seats. Shadows shifted unnaturally, twisting around them like living things. The ship itself seemed angry. Then, the screaming started. One by one, Vecna's crew vanished, pulled into the shadows, swallowed by the ship itself. Vecna backed away, his breathing ragged. His pulse thundered in his ears. Stop, he roared. You can't. The human stepped forward, and Vecna's feet refused to move. Something was holding him in place. The old man looked down at him, expression unreadable. You should have left me in that cell. Then, darkness. And Captain Vecna knew no more. Darkness. A cold, suffocating void. Captain Vecna's mind struggled against it, but there was nothing to grasp. No walls, no floor, just an endless abyss swallowing him whole. Then, light. Blinding, sharp. Vecna gasped as he hit the metal floor of the bridge, his lungs burning, his vision blurred. He was still alive, but his crew, gone. The bridge was silent. No panicked officers, no clicking claws against the control panels. Just him and the human. The old man stood near the main console, his hands calmly resting on it. He didn't even look at Vecna. He didn't need to, because he had already won. Vecna gritted his teeth. His limbs trembled as he tried to rise. What did you do? He growled. The human didn't answer immediately. He simply stared at the main screen. at the fleet of warships now facing them. Vecna followed his gaze, and his stomach dropped. His empire's fleet, hundreds of warships, all waiting outside the system. They had come to check why his ship had suddenly gone silent. Vecna felt a brief flicker of hope. The fleet could destroy this ship. Even if the human had taken control, he couldn't fight all of them. But then, the human finally spoke. His voice was calm. Too calm. "You really don't understand what you've done, do you?" Vecna hissed, trying to stand. "You've only delayed the inevitable. My fleet will. Your fleet is already dead." Vecna froze. The human tapped a single key on the console. The view screen shifted. Vecna's breath caught in his throat. Because the warships weren't moving. They weren't responding. They were just drifting. Dark, lifeless, dead. His empire's greatest war fleet, destroyed without a single shot fired. Vecna's mouth went dry. How? The old human exhaled slowly, like he had been waiting for this moment. "You stole this ship years ago," he said. "You took it from the battlefield, not knowing what it really was." Vecna's claws dug into the floor. It was a warship, nothing more. The human shook his head. "No," he said softly. "It was a grave." A deep, haunting hum filled the bridge. The walls shuddered. The floor vibrated. And for the first time, Vecna heard them. The whispers. Faint, distant voices. Thousands of them. Echoing through the ship like ghosts. Vecna's eyes widened in horror. What is this?" The human finally turned to face him. His expression was calm. But his eyes were ancient. "This ship wasn't just mine," he said. "It belonged to my crew, my people, my brothers and sisters who died when you stole it." Vecna's breathing quickened. Something moved in the shadows behind the human. No, not something. Someone. Then another, and another. Figures emerged from the darkness, their forms flickering, shifting like smoke. Humans. Their faces were scared. Their eyes burned with something beyond death. Vecna's body locked up. "Impossible," he whispered. The old man stepped forward, his voice a whisper of thunder. "You took my crew from me." The whispering voices grew louder. The figures closed in. The old man's eyes burned like dying stars. "Now, we take yours." Vecna screamed. The shadows swallowed him whole. The ship rumbled once more. The voices faded. The air grew still. Then, silence. The old human stood alone on the bridge. The ship had been cleansed. The war was over. And the last captain of the lost warship had finally come home.